SLT Mobitel Home Broadband සමගින් non-stop ගමනකට data බෝවන්. SLT Mobitel Home Broadband සමගින් non-stop ගමනකට data බෝවන්.
දැන් ග්‍රෑම් 25 Glow and Lovely face cream එකකින් රුපියල් 95ක ඉතිරියක්.
Tonight, fruitless costs. The Auditor General's Department reveals an expenditure of 2.6 billion rupees incurred by the Department of Registration of Persons over the lagging Digital National ID project. The only way. JJB MP Harini Amarasuriya says the country cannot take progressive steps to get out of the crisis without an election.
The cost of maintaining a government like this is having far greater cost on the economy than the cost of an election.
Taxes imposed on businesses raised to 30%, while tax exemption imposed on IT businesses to be lifted from April 1st, 2023. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Thursday, the 13th of October 2022.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9, live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening. You're joining the Primetime English News Bulletin of AdaDerana 24 and I'm Andrew Bernard. Now, apart from the tax revisions mentioned in the new amendment gazetted by President Ranil Wickremesinghe bringing about changes to the Inland Revenue Act on income, taxes charged from small and medium-sized corporates, exporting companies and many others have been raised to 30%. Further, the proposed gazetted bill has suggested for the removal of tax exemption granted to IT businesses from the 1st of April next year, making them liable to a tax rate of 30% from thereafter. Changes to the Inland Revenue Act were gazetted through a new bill published by Ranil Wickremesinghe on Tuesday. Apart from the increase in taxes proposed through the new Gazette on Income, a host of taxes imposed on businesses have also been revised. Accordingly, the taxes imposed on the profit of small and medium-sized businesses, which stood at 14%, was raised to 30%. The tax rate on the profit earned by manufacturing businesses has also been increased from 18% to 30%. The taxes that were imposed on alcohol, tobacco, betting and gaming were hiked to 40%. The tax income payable by banks, non-banking institutions and insurance companies, which were once at 24%, have been increased to 30% through the new bill. In the meantime, the new tax levied on businesses providing health services will increase from 14% to 30%. Export companies will also now be required to pay taxes that are subject to 30% of export taxes, an increase of 16% from the previous 14%. In relation to the capital gains tax, the new bill gazetted by the President has proposed for the tax to be increased from 10% to 30% in the case of investment assets. Meanwhile, the tax exemption given to IT service providers is also scheduled to be removed from the 1st of April next year. Accordingly, those institutions will also be subject to a tax of 30%. Further, non-permanent employees of an institution earning an amount exceeding 100,000 rupees per month by providing services such as teaching, lecturing, conducting examinations, examination supervision, etc. will be charged with a withholding tax of 5%. If the income earned by doctors, engineers, chartered accountants, lawyers, software developers, researchers, etc. while providing services to an organization exceeds 100,000 rupees per month, they will be subject to a withholding tax of 5%. They too will be subject to a 5% withholding tax. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ali Sabri, says his ministry is committed to cooperating with the private sector in order to continually support their business operations and boost exports. Addressing a meeting with representatives of the Chambers of Commerce and export-oriented organizations in Sri Lanka, he said all missions under the purview of the ministry would facilitate in the private sector to achieve economic and trade objectives. Meanwhile, officials of the business organizations and chambers are of the view that successful conclusion of free trade agreements with key countries need to be considered as a priority of the Foreign Ministry in order to boost exports. A meeting between the Minister of Foreign Affairs Ali Sabri and representatives of the Chambers of Commerce and export-oriented organizations was held to to discuss opportunities and challenges faced by exporting businesses. According to the ministry, the meeting also focused on obtaining views, ideas and propositions on the most effective courses of action that the ministry could take to facilitate businesses to develop their business endeavours and to boost exports. Addressing the gathering, Minister of Foreign Affairs Ali Sabri said the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is committed to cooperate with the private sector and the chambers to support their business activities and the export sector. He assured that all missions which are under the purview of the ministry would assist and facilitate the private sector in achieving their economic and trade objectives and will continue to engage professionally with the private sector in connecting them with international partners. While expressing their views, officials of the business organizations and chambers highlighted the successful conclusion of the free trade agreements, with key should be a priority for the foreign ministry at this juncture in order to boost exports. They also urged the government to adopt a well-structured mechanism to enhance the country's image internationally by addressing issues arising regarding negative publicity. Now, the Auditor General's Department points out that the project to introduce a new digital national identity card has been dragging on uncompleted for 16 years at a cost of 2.6 billion rupees. In a special statement report on the Department for Registration of Persons, it outlines that the project that started in 2006 with an estimated cost of 8 billion rupees still remains unfinished. According to a special financial report prepared by the Auditor General's Department on the Department of Registration of Persons, 2.65 billion rupees has been spent by the government between 2006 and 2021 to introduce a digital national identity card. However, the department has failed to introduce such a development thus far. The special report says even though allocations had not been made for capital costs under the Digital National ID project, 19.35 million rupees had been spent to purchase 2 vehicles last year. During the period between 2017 and 2021, 79.69 million rupees have been paid as salaries and allowances of 29 employees, and including that amount, a total of 199.69 million rupees have incurred as administrative costs. The report says that a total of 1.11 billion rupees have been spent on physical and IT infrastructure development. However, the department has been unable to achieve progress in digitalizing public data. Further, 4 officers have been recruited for human resources development and training, and 817,530 rupees have been spent for them for 8 months last year. However, the Auditor General's Department says that no training had taken place in these officers. Now, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the Samagi Janabala Vegaya once again demand for the government to hold the local government elections without postponing it. Further, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa says the parliamentary elections should be called to form a government that listens to public opinion. Meanwhile, the Freedom People's Congress expressed their objection to the government over the new taxes introduced in a backdrop of where the country's inflation is rising.
මෙවර මේ බදු තුල අපේ ආර්ථිකයට ඇති කරන ව්‍යසනය සුළුපටු නැහැ. ඒකට ප්‍රථම උදාහරණය තමයි වෙනදා සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ලක්ෂ 3ක් විතර මාසික ආදායමක් හිමි පුද්ගලයෙක්ගේ වාර්ෂික බදු ගෙවීමේ බැඳියාව රුපියල් 36000 මේ වෙද්දී 4,20,000 දක්වා වැඩි වෙන්නේ.
මේ ඉහළ බදු ගෙවන්නේ උද්දමනය 170ක පමණ වැඩි වෙලා තියෙන වෙලාවක. ප්‍රතිඵලය වෙන්නේ මොකද්ද? මේ රටේ විශේෂයෙන්ම ඉගෙන ගත්ත මිනිස්සු, වෘත්තිකයෝ, ව්‍යාපාරිකයෝ අතහැරයන්න පටන් ගන්නවා. රටේ ආදායම වැඩි කරගන්නේ නැතුව බදු ගහන මේ මෝඩ ප්‍රතිපත්තිය අපි අනුමත කරන්නේ නැහැ.
අනිවාර්යෙන් අවධාරණය කරනවා හෙට දවසේදී අපි බදු ගෙවන්නේ නැහැ කියන මූවමන්ට් එකක් බිහිවීම වළක්වන්න බෑ.
රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ ජනාධිපතිවරයා ලෑස්ති වෙලා මේ රටේ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී අයිතියත් විනාශ කරනවා. පළාත් පාලන මැතිවරණය කල් දාන්න යනවා. මේ මැතිවරණය පවත්වන්න අපි කටයුතු කරන්න කියලා ආණ්ඩුවට බල කරනවා.
විරුද්ධ පක්ෂ මතධාරීන් අද අපිට පේනවා නැවතත් මේ රට ලේවිලක් බවට පරිවර්තනය කරන්න උත්සාහ දරමින් සිටිනවා. මැතිවරණයක් ඉල්ලන අවස්ථාවක් නෙමෙයි මේක. මැතිවරණයක් ඉල්ලනවා නම් කවුරු හරි ඒ කියන්නේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාව නැවත කුණුබක්කියට ඇදලා දැමීම සඳහා කරන ක්‍රියාවලියක් හැටියටයි අපිට අර්ථකථනය කරන්න තිබෙන්නේ.
ආණ්ඩුවට කිසිදු නීතිමය බලයක් නැහැ දැන් පළාත් පාලන මැතිවරණ කල් දාන්න. ඒ නිසා අපි මැතිවරණ කොමිසමට කියනවා කරුණාකරලා නිවැරදි වෙලාවට මැතිවරණේ තියන්න කටයුතු කරන්න කියලා.
දැන් මේගොල්ලෝ ඡන්ද වලට බය වෙලා තමයි කියන්නේ മന്ത്രിවරු 8000 වැඩි පළාත් පාලන වැඩපිළිවෙලේ වෙනසක් දකින්නට ඕනෙලු. മന്ത്രിවරු 8000ක් නිර්මාණය කරපු වැඩසටහනේ පීත්‍රවරයා වර්තමාන ජනාධිපතිතුමා. මම කියනවා මේ ආණ්ඩුවට ජනමතයට සවන් දෙන අලුත් ආණ්ඩුවක් බිහි කරන්න මැතිවරණයක් තියන්න කියලා.
Now, despite the government's stance that holding elections at present, given Sri Lanka's current economic situation, would be an unbearable burden to the general public, MP of the Jathika Janabalawegaya, Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, believes that, on the contrary, holding elections would be the only solution to getting the country out of this crisis and regain the mandate of the people. Speaking to Indivari Amuwatha on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, MP Amarasuriya said that the cost of having the current government in power far outweighs the cost that would be incurred through general elections, which she highlights could be curtailed if handled properly.
What is the solution that your coalition proposes that Sri Lanka implement right now, apart from going in for elections?
The reason why we are asking for elections is as a first step towards resolving the crisis, because there is a crisis of trust in the government. And without that trust, there can't be political stability. Without political stability, we can't begin to resolve the economic crisis that we are facing. So that is why we are calling for an election, to give the people an opportunity to establish a government that they can work with, that they can trust for at least 1.5 years, 2 years. Every new government is given an opportunity. People then take a step back and allow the government to go ahead and do things. But this government is seen as a continuation of the government that the people have been rejecting and the people have been protesting against. That is why it's going to be very difficult for this government to win the trust of the people, especially when they continue to behave in a way that disregards the mood and the sentiments of the general public.
If MP Anurukumara Dissanayake was appointed as president at the time during the discussions, search of head of state, do you think you would have still supported a new election?
Yes, because when we put forward a proposal for an interim government, said that we are willing for Anurukumara Dissanayake to take on the position as Prime Minister at that point. There were two conditions that we put. One was the resignation of the President, and second was an all-party interim government with a specific time frame, with a specific agenda. We had proposed something like 3 to 6 months and then an election. So even in the proposal we put forward after May 9th, it was for an interim all-party government as a transition before an election. After Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled the country and there was a couple of days of uncertainty, then again we tried to put that proposal forward of an interim government for a specific duration with a specific agenda consisting of all the representative political parties in Parliament current.
The current situation of the country does not allow for an election. Do you think the country and the economy could bear the burden of such an expense?
This country has held elections in far worse situations. There are ways in which an election can be conducted economically.
We don't have a culture or tradition where we have managed in such. We don't have the technology to do such.
It's not a question of technology. You can figure out a way of spending less on an election. You can have an election campaign that calls for curtailing in spending. All kinds of things can be done. In fact, there are government sector unions that have come forward who have said they will waive their allowances and whatever other payments they get during election times in order to bring down the cost of an election. The cost of maintaining a government like this is bigger. The cost of having a government that is not working, a government that is not trusted by the people, a government that is unable to fix the problems or respond to the people's problems is having far greater cost on the economy than the cost of an election.
What other solutions do you have going forward, apart from going in for an election? If from within Parliament, what does your coalition propose?
Within Parliament, it's very difficult with this composition of the Parliament. What we need right now is a Parliament that is able to respond, to act on behalf of the people, to recognize the suffering that people are under, to recognize the problems that people are facing, and to come up with solutions. Instead, this Parliament is functioning, which still has a majority by the SLPP, is still functioning in terms of how to protect its own power. So what you see is a continuation of the kind of corrupt, deal-making politics that has plagued this country for so long. Without changing that, there is no way that we can move forward. So this Parliament has lost its legitimacy, and this Parliament is precisely what is preventing the kinds of reforms and changes that are necessary to take the country forward. So we are not just asking for an election for the sake of asking for an election. We are asking for an election in order to be able to start resolving the very serious problems that this country is facing. And that's not just to say that we are intent on forming a government. The people have to be allowed to choose If we are chosen, then we have a set of proposals about how to take the country forward. But to do that, you need a parliament that is progressive. You need a parliament that can be led by people who are anti-corruption and who are serious about accountability and transparency and all those other fundamental features of a governance that are necessary for a country to come out of this huge crisis that we are facing.
Stay with us for more news after this short break.
අයිනෝ පුතා හැබැයියා ගෙදර නිදියන්නෙම අමුතු තැනක.
කාලගුණය කොහොමුණත් රයිනෝ නං වාලට සේෆ් තමයි මුළු ගෙදරම. Rhino Cement Roofing Sheets. Then you know Rhino. I know.
Big 3.
Uber Eats මගින් ඉදිරිපත් කරන ආදරයෙන් අවශ්‍යතා ඇතියට අත්‍යවශ්‍ය භාණ්ඩ පරිත්‍යාග කිරීමට වේදිකාවක්.
Welcome back. Now, the international advisor on climate change to President Ranil Wickremesinghe, Erit Solheim, says Sri Lanka is very vulnerable to climate change at the moment. The former Norwegian minister said dry areas in Sri Lanka's north are getting drier and wet regions in south are getting wetter. He also said threats from landslides and extreme weather will increase and measures must be taken to overcome these challenges. Further, Solheim said tackling climate change, however, brings an enormous opportunity to create green jobs in sectors of renewable energy, electric mobility, tree planting, green agriculture and ecotourism. The State Minister Sanat Nishantha surrendered to court today after a warrant was issued on him over his failure to appear before court to show the cause over the contempt of court charges levelled against him. Summons were issued to the State Minister on the 29th of September and the 5th of October, ordering him to show cause over the contempt of court charges levelled against him. When summons were issued on the 5th of October, the parliamentarian was ordered to make an appearance at the court today. Early today, the appeals court directed the IGP to present the parliamentarian as he failed to comply with the court order. Now, the Ministry of Health states that nearly 600,000 dengue patients were reported across the island this year compared to last year. According to the National Dengue Control Unit at the Ministry of Health, a total of 59,319 patients have been identified so far. This number also includes 1,152 patients that were detected last week. The NDCU pointed out that the total number of patients reported during the relevant period last year was only 19,912. The highest number of dengue cases was reported from Colombo, Gampaha and Kaluthara districts, while the districts of Kandy, Galle, Jaffna, Kegol, Puttalam and Kurunegala have also recorded more dengue cases this year compared to last year. Welcome back in your business news. Sri Lanka's stocks posted its best daily gain in 2 months today on bargain hunting on beaten down heavyweight shares. However, the turnover was lower than this year's daily average. The main all share price index gained 3.34% to close at 9,148.55. Stock market data showed that the day's gain was the highest rise since the 12th of August. The most liquid index S&P SL20 closed at 4.36% or 117.3 points higher at 2,805.11. The market saw a net foreign inflow of 258 million rupees today. The inflow so far this year is 16.7 billion rupees after 18 billion rupees of net offshore buying was reported in the last 42 consecutive sessions amid positive sentiment over an IMF deal. The market saw a turnover of 2.5 billion rupees, lower than this year's average turnover of 3.2 billion rupees. The index has lost 7.8% so far this month and 25.1% this year to date after being one of the world's best stock markets with an 80% return last year when large volumes of money were printed. And that's all the news we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.